Hello and welcome. It might be hard to imagine now, but not that long ago, there was a world that lived without computers. And we're gonna take a trip back to that time, 1982 to be exact, when computers were just brand new, and talk about Tron. Tron was released in 1982, same exact year as Epcot, and I think that's really cool because both of them dealt and still do deal with futuristic technology. Epcot a lot more now than Tron. Tron's a lot more fantasy and strictly video game related, but I think it's neat that they were able to line it up together. And it's a very interesting film. It's my first time I got to see it. This movie basically failed at the box office when it was first released, but because of the video game it came out, that gave it its cult status. I've never played the video game, I actually never looked into the video game, but I am very curious now, and I will probably do something alongside of the video game next year after we wrap up all these reviews. But stay tuned because I'm gonna add that on my list of checking out video games. This one takes place in its present time, so it does take place in the beginning of the 80s, and it has that futuristic techno look. The opening of this movie is actually really fantastic.
All right, give me room. Here we go.
We have this amazing futuristic retro look where it's completely retro now, but back then it was the future, and it starts off super promising and then things get strange and then it becomes very lackluster. We have some really well-known actors in this film. Well, Jeff Bridges is basically the one that's only known today, but it does star Jeff Bridges. And then we have Bruce Letner, who both of them will return in the second film that we'll talk about tomorrow. We have an interesting plot. They are trying to get control back from the master programmer, controller, who's taking over this video game that they've been working on. But the video game's also alive, and the programs are also being tortured by this master controller and dying. And the three characters have to end up jumping into the game. Even though they don't know they're jumping into the game, it just transforms them from them trying to type everything in, because back then computers were all in binary code anyway, so ones and zeros, and it's more praised for its visual effects compared to its story. The story honestly was so boring to me. It was very lackluster, and I really did appreciate the visual effects. The visual effects were amazing, very avant-garde looking, and I know that they did shoot it in black and white, and then they rotoscoped it and colored it in, which took a lot of work.
You're getting brutal, Sark. Brutal and needlessly sadistic.
Thank you, Master Control.
And it is very visually stunning, but there are scenes that reminded me of Star Wars that was very popular at the time. It was probably a coincidence. I don't think they did it as a homage, but it was interesting because it did seem familiar. And then we just have everything retro, 80s looking, and it definitely does fit into that time capsule. When you think of 80s, you think of this.
Baby doesn't handle so good in town. What's this do? How about this one? Comes a headache.
We do have mention of the life cycles in here, and we'll continue that tomorrow. I'm gonna wait and talk about the ride correlation with tomorrow, since our light cycles are just basic and they have light cycles in the second Tron as well, and that's the one that the ride is going to be based off of compared to this one. It was very smart for its time period. It does get a little bit meta, but it also does predict the future in a lot of sense. There is a scene where they talk about how computers are going to start thinking for themselves.
Won't that be grand? Computers and the programs will start thinking and the people will stop.
And that does sound very familiar today. Even though it's been 30 years, almost 40, as scary as that seems, it's almost 40 years old, this film. I feel old. We have come a long way, but we're still not that far advanced that we thought we would. And it's interesting to see that it's been 40 years, but this movie makes a lot more sense, and we're just reaching some of the things that they talked about in here. I do think it's worth checking out if you do like video games, or if you are appreciative of anything with that future retro aspect, especially because it is going to be a lot more relevant within the Magic Kingdom in Florida. It is cool to get to know its heritage, because even though it's based on the most recent film that Tron came out with, this wouldn't have that film without this film. So it's definitely worth checking out just to watch it one time and just to be aware of it. But it wasn't that impressive to me, at least with the story. The effects are fantastic. They honestly saved this film. And I am interested in checking out the video game, so that'll be later on. But otherwise, it's not that spectacular. I can understand why it failed, even though it has a cult status now. And it wasn't a fully enjoyable movie. I found it really boring and very lackluster overall. But tomorrow we're going to continue and talk about Tron Legacy, so you can stay tuned. As always, I hope you have a magical day, and I will see you real soon.